Welcome to the Building Spirit-Filled Homes podcast by Red Mountain Community Church. This podcast exists to help us engage with a variety of topics through a biblical lens. It is our prayer that we'll take all that we learn from these conversations and apply them to our lives so that we can make a kingdom impact on those around us, starting in our home. Thanks for joining us for our conversation today. All right. Welcome to another Building Spirit-Filled Homes podcast. I'm Pastor Dave with you again. Today we've got Perry Emerick, who is a professional Christian counselor who's connected to Christian counseling services, and we're just excited to have him here today to talk about more ways where we can learn to love each other, understand how we can create homes of refuge and safety and peace, and how we can look at life through biblical lenses. So today we're going to talk about sin and the tension of our pain, and we'll see where the conversation goes. So thanks for joining us. All right, Perry, thanks for coming with us, and it's a pleasure to connect with you, and I think it's always important to bridge the gap between counseling and in the church, and I think over the years that's gotten kind of messy or misunderstood, and so I really appreciate what you're doing in the counseling community that you're connected to, and so I think it's important as we're building spirit-filled homes to have these conversations around sin and pain and trauma, and so we can help better understand that, and so I appreciate you taking the time to help us kind of unpack that a little bit, give some nuggets, right? We're not going to do everything in the short time we have, but if we could just engage in one of those conversations today, I think it'd be a blessing. So
yeah, thanks so much for having me here.
You bet.
I appreciate it.
So when we talk about, you're unpacking this idea of like sin and pain and how those two can get confused, or maybe the tension in that. How do you help counselees step into that space, or better maybe understand that, so that they can find freedom and new life in that, versus what we talked about a little bit before this, like feeling like just this enormous, I don't know, dumping of shame.
Yeah.
And so we don't find freedom, we just feel worse and feel
Right.
hopelessness. So how do you help people in that, in a better understanding?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I grew up in Christian culture. I understand how it works and understand the gospel and the good news. And what's often taught is our sin separates us from God. No one is righteous, not even one, and the wages of sin is death. And so, often what we've created, understandably, is there's kind of this obsession with how do we avoid sin. And sin becomes the scarlet letter. It becomes this really big deal. It becomes kind of the main focus. And again, like with that, there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of guilt. And one of the things that was really pretty kind of a significant shift for me, moving from being in ministry for so long into being a therapist, is kind of having a better understanding of why do we go to sin. What we're taught is in the fall, we now have this sin nature Paul speaks about, right? The flesh, and it's my sin nature in me. But I feel like, that kind of misses the real heart of our humanity and what God intended in that. So the way I try to present it is this. I believe that we are created for this secure connection. That's what the picture of Genesis creates. Genesis 1 and 2, right? God was there. They were naked. They were unashamed. They were learning how to be human. There was this security. There was a trust. It was this beautiful thing. And what the fall did was break the security of that connection with God, right? And, condensing a lot, what I believe that God equipped us with in the absence of the secure connection he really wanted for us because of our choice, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Is he equipped us with this incredibly strong, creative drive to survive.
Okay.
And by survive, I even mean like to be okay in our own skin. And what, for me, makes sense, what I've kind of discovered is the purpose really of that drive to survive isn't just that we keep the human body alive, right? That's what we often think about, right?
Sure.
Food, water, shelter, all that stuff. But really the pinnacle of what that drive is about is relationship. It's connection. And not just any connection, it's security in
Mm.
connection, right?
Yeah,
We want to feel like we are secure, we are loved, we are seen, we are accepted for who we are.
absolutely.
And so what happens so much is, we live in a fallen world. There's trauma, there's hardship, there's addictions, there's all kinds of things in our humanity. We tend to try to find out strategies to be okay.
Mm.
And in the absence of sometimes that secure connection that we want, what God desires, we adopt these negative beliefs about ourselves,
Mm.
right?
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know about this, right? We all kind of do it. Like I'm not good enough.
Sure.
I'm a failure. I'm unlovable. I'm not like whatever it
Sure.
is. It's not rational. It's
Right.
not true.
Yeah.
But sometimes that just feels really true. And usually we adopt that when we're really young,
Sure.
not because anybody maliciously set out to go, hey,
Yeah.
you suck as a human, right?
Sure.
It's just kind of what our little brains do to try to make sense so that we can be okay.
Mm.
So as we get older, then it doesn't feel good to live with this negative belief about myself.
Mm.
So what we tend to do is we try to find strategies to be okay.
Mm.
One of those strategies involves like, how do we try to relate to each other? How do we try to kind of control relationships, so to speak, to be okay?
Sure.
But the other one off is how do I escape this really crappy feeling that I have about me inside of me?
Mm.
And so often that's where those sinful behaviors come from.
Mm.
They're escape mechanisms: alcohol, drugs, pornography,
Sure.
illicit sex, workaholism sometimes, right? Uh, Adrenaline junkies, all kinds of these things tend to be these escape mechanisms
Okay.
to not deal with what doesn't feel good about me.
Mm.
Is that kind of making sense?
Yeah. So how do you get someone, one, to recognize, one, the lie that they're believing, two, that they're this acting out, which is sin, is actually a byproduct of trying to deal with this longing and desire for the secure connection that God created us to
Right.
be. Like, how, how do you reveal that to somebody who's already believing a lie and then
Sure.
trying to kind of numb themselves because they're not actually dealing with the lie?
Right. Yeah, that
Would
makes sense.
that be
Yep.
make sense?
Yeah, and a lot of that is because of the benefits of psychology and some of the neuroscience and some of that study. We were able to have a far greater understanding of the effects of trauma and attachment wounds
Mm.
and kind of humanize us
Okay.
in a way. Sometimes it's just being compassionate with
Okay.
somebody
Sure. Yeah.
because let's be real. Like, you've heard the phrase, we can be our own worst enemy, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that's because if I don't like me in some
Mm.
small way, I'm going to be really hard on me. So sometimes just the opportunity to be compassionate with somebody, to validate, like, gosh, that must be really hard.
Mm.
That's been really tough. That must have been really difficult. And then, to kind of begin to paint this picture in a way that helps them to stop back and actually be curious and notice those things.
Mm.
I want to be careful. Sometimes people go like, so then sin isn't my fault. No, sin's our fault.
Sure.
Like, being compelled to act out in sin is different than the actual sin I do.
Mm.
And it is important that we recognize sin is sin. It sin harms ourselves, it harms relationships, it causes all kinds of harm, and we are
Mhm.
ultimately responsible and accountable to that. But what I try to help people understand is, where is Jesus in all of this?
Mhm.
And see, that's the good news portion that I feel like sometimes we miss in our gospel stories.
Mm.
Is that the good news in this is, I don't, Jesus isn't obsessed and consumed by our sin,
Mm.
right? We get obsessed
Sure.
and consumed by it for lots of reasons.
Sure.
But like, sin's been around since the fall, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like it's like, oh my gosh, I can't
It's a
believe.
surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, I can't believe Perry did that. What?
Yeah.
Perry? No, I think what it is he, of all people, being the secure, loving God and Father he
Mm.
is able to recognize, like, sin is its own consequence, and I'm the one who suffers, and those I want to be close to suffer.
Mm.
And rather than condemning me in my sin, he took that, right?
Mhm.
And he said, there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, right?
Right.
He took all the sin. Like even for those who aren't in Christ Jesus, he still took their
Sure.
sin.
Yeah.
They just have not received that yet.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think he's doing is he's saying, okay, now with this out of the way, what would it be like for you to invite me into that, into the hurt, into the pain, into these things that most of us have even forgotten? We've just rationalized it and normalized it. Like, yeah,
Sure.
yeah, my parents, they would use a horse crop on me sometimes, but that's just how it was, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, really? Like
Right.
you normalize that
Sure.
somebody felt the need to use a horse crop on you as a way of teaching you?
Right.
Like, it seems a little extreme. Now, that's me.
Sure.
But I think there's these things where you go like, yeah, it's fine. I probably deserved it. Really?
Yeah.
And so there's some of these things where, again, we make ourselves the blame for
Mhm.
some of these things that then shape us, and we're just trying to escape those. So I just really try to bring some humanity into it to recognize Jesus came to take that away, but because he is so secure, to go, will you invite me into that painful part?
Mm.
And can you let me love you there?
Which is so important because as I'm hearing you say, it seems like our natural default is to try to fix it ourselves
All
or
the
to
time.
normalize it or to numb it. But the reality of it is, we actually need to go to Jesus with it because he's the actual one that meets us with compassion and
Totally.
grace. And he's already paid the price.
He's already paid.
So he's like, stop putting me on the cross. So how do you, as a Christian counselor, or what are some tools to help maybe families or individuals or parents invite Jesus into a situation? Like how do you encourage somebody maybe to take that step, or what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a number of things that we can do as families, in communities, to try to maybe show up in a way that really reflects the heart of Jesus.
Mm,
The first off, I think, is, you know, rather than going to judgment,
mm,
which is what we want to do, right? Because there's lots of reasons why. As a parent, it's really sometimes really hard. Like if my kid acts out, right, in a way or does something that
sure.
often we really have to kind of step back and go, okay, is my anger, my frustration, my response, my fix, is it about caring for them, or is it triggering some of those things in me that I'm not even
Mm,
aware of, right?
okay.
Like I didn't raise you like that,
Mm,
or I can't believe you're doing that. That's so embarrassing. Okay, well, is that my insecurity that's
mm,
then causing me to act out in ways to try to fix this problem so I'm okay?
mm,
Versus how do I first, and you got to begin with you as the
mm,
individual, right? So as a parent, I have to be willing to go, okay, Lord, what is that doing in me?
mm,
What do you want to teach me in this?
mm,
What's my fear in this?
mm. So you got to
What's
look at yourself first, and
always
then it reminds me of John 13, where Jesus says, go and love as you've been loved by
yes,
me, and that will show them you're my
exactly.
disciples. So as you're saying that, it's that passage is just rolling in my head of like, yeah, you got to look at yourself first. You got to own your part,
Right.
and kind of that messiness,
Hmm.
and then I'm actually then look to Jesus to love as he's loved, which is with compassion and grace and truth, right? Because
100%.
he does convict, right? He does challenge, and he says, "Hey, in my love for you, I am going to share truth with you."
100%. But he
So,
always leads with love and
right,
grace.
absolutely.
He always meets them where they're at in their pain, and he loves them there.
Mm,
And I think what he's trying to do, and this is the beautiful thing, Jesus, I don't believe, like some of us just have this view of Jesus. He's just waiting to kind of flick us, right? Just kind of
mm,
like, and I think what he's saying is, I'm not going to do that.
mm,
I'm never going to hold this against you. I'm never going to weaponize this. I'm just going to love you in it. But I am going to reveal the truth because God is a God of love.
yeah,
And God is, love requires truth to really be love.
sure, absolutely.
But love also requires grace,
Mm,
if that's what that is. But we can't miss the truth. So I think it begins with, uh, we got to turn in. And this is hard, I think, because in Christian culture, sometimes we talk about selflessness and dying to yourself, and it's about loving other people and all these things.
sure.
But if I'm not healthy, dying to myself is actually a very unhealthy act because
Mm,
I'm not caring for myself in a way that allows me to genuinely love and care those who I'm in relationship. So I have to have enough capacity to turn in and go, what's not healthy in me?
Mm.
Lord, what do you want to teach in me?
It's kind of like that
How do you want
Psalm 139,
Right.
23.
Search me,
Search me,
know me,
know me,
see in
reveal.
me
Mm.
what I need to kind of invite my hurt, my pain, my struggles that I need to invite you into, my insecurity
Mm.
that I need to invite you into, so that what I can do is to show up in a secure and grounded way with my let's say my kids in this
Sure.
example.
Yeah.
And where we really become a blessing with our kids is we also learn how to get curious about what's going on in you that would
Mm.
compel you to choose that.
Mm.
Like, what's going on in you that doesn't feel good, that you're struggling with? Maybe you don't know how to talk about, maybe you don't know how to
Sure.
share, maybe you don't even know how to admit is true for you because it's embarrassing, it's
Sure.
shameful, whatever it is. That would lead you to do that in a
Mm.
way that isn't loving you
Right.
and isn't actually creating what I think you really want.
Yeah.
And so when we can get curious, see, curiosity, I think, is the
Mm.
key. Curiosity and this compassion piece versus what we do is we define what it is and we go to judgment, which totally shuts somebody down
Mm.
and actually takes away from this secure, trusted relationship, which I think parents want.
Sure.
So we've got to contend with our own insecurities. We've got to invite Jesus into that. We got to learn how to meet our kids where they're at in a place of curiosity as
Mm.
well. It doesn't mean we can't have consequences and all
Sure.
those things, but let's make sure that we're rightly understanding what the real issue is.
Yeah.
The issue is that isn't necessarily that they stole from Circle K or
Right.
something, right?
Sure.
The issue is what in you
Mm.
is leading you to need to act out in that way. Now, we
Yeah.
can still have a consequence for
Sure.
this, but we get to apply that same kind of, grace doesn't mean you don't have a consequence necessarily. It means I don't hold this against you in a way
Right.
that diminishes who you are.
Yeah.
I love you in it. And let's contend with that
Sure.
so that you can begin to recognize this isn't what healthiness looks like for you.
And I think that's so helpful, just that, again, that two-part piece, dealing with yourself first,
Always.
right? Not just like just responding, but like, okay, I need to check myself with Jesus first, and then I need to actually ask questions. We have a tendency just like immediately go
100%.
to
Yes.
judgment, and then we try to put our own explanation on it. So I think that's so helpful to be reminded of that, of we need to be curious, because it's actually not about the gum that you stole from Circle
Right.
K.
Right.
There's a deeper thing
There's
going
a
on
deeper
here.
thing.
And we can't actually meet you with compassion if we're making it about ourselves, or our own stuff is boiling up inside of us. So we really actually need to meet with Jesus, ask him to reveal, okay, what's going on in me because of this, so that I can love my child, my spouse, right? I mean, I think it works with marriage too, or any
It
relationship,
works
right?
with every relationship.
Somebody even within the church. Oh my gosh, I can't believe, well, what is going on in me that's making that seem like such a thing? And unless I meet them with compassion and grace, uh, I'm not going to be able to ask those questions to actually reveal the root, which I know is real big with you guys, is understanding. Well, it should be for all of us, understanding the rootedness of what's actually going on. We have a tendency to work on the surfacey stuff,
Totally.
and
We just
it
want to
works for
fix the
six
problem.
months, and then it's like, why is this happening again? And it's like, well, we just sprayed Christian pesticide on everything,
Yeah.
or we did a tool, or we did, but man, we never actually pulled the weeds. So, well, Perry, we could probably talk for hours about this, but I so appreciate even what we've talked about already, and I think that's just some great stuff for the Red Mountain family and beyond. Just a little marinade on, and again, if you guys want to connect with Perry in any way, all of his information is going to be here. Again, he's one of our Christian counseling partners as well, and so we can get you connected to him as well. But thank you for spending some time with us, and we look forward to having more conversations, which we will in just a moment. So
Appreciate it.
appreciate
being
you,
here.
appreciate your heart, and just your wisdom and your faith, and how you bring all of that together to care for people well.
Thank you.
And so appreciate you and appreciate what you're doing. So thanks for joining us on another podcast, and we look forward to meeting with you again soon. Thanks.